know, we lost that time around.
I'd like to call this meeting, special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to deal with the proposed new subdivision ordinance and public comments of the same. Everybody please stand for prayer.
Father, we come before you tonight, Lord, and ask that you guide us in the leadership of this meeting, Lord, to be conducted in your ways pleasing unto you, satisfactory. We give you the praise, Lord, in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right,
Ron Morris is here. Lance Burgess is absent. Shirley Shirley's absent. Roy Ann Lane. Here. Mark McDermott. Here. Josh O'Quinn. Here. Chris Starr. Here. Debbie Owens is absent. Yeah. We have four.
all right, item 4, approve the agenda. Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign.
Who was second?
All right, item 5, new business. Roundtable discussion, subdivision regulations, and major development ordinance revision. J.R. Rushan was the committee chairman for the committee that was established to review the subdivision ordinance and recommend changes for the Polish jury. And so at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to J.R. to lead the discussion. Any public comments we may have from the public.
Did anybody print out the significant changes I said? Yes, you did. That's correct. Okay, first thing we're going to do is go over some significant changes. Now, the biggest change in this whole ordinance, subdivision regulations, is to split apart maps and development. Maps fall under purview by state law of the Planning and Zoning Commission. They're going to fall under subdivision regulations as we go through whatever final version that the Planning and Zoning Commission will adopt. Second part, major developments with infrastructure, streets, roads, selling for resale, the type of developments are going to fall under the ordinance, which falls under the police jury. And when we recommend the version to the police jury, they'll hold a public hearing for it because it's an ordinance change, just like any other ordinance change. I'm going to read through the list of significant changes, and then we're going to go around each commissioner and see if they've got any issues with. We're going to deal with subdivision regulations first. The first significant change was reduce the number of exceptions down to 7. One of them is, the first one is new plats, previous land, no new lots, putting them into a survey. So they were in a physical description prior to that. The next 3 deal with courts, borders, divisions, splitting the partnership, whatever the judge says, well, 2 of them. The judge says, we abide by it. There is no vote on that. He makes a final decision. The next thing will be any sale of state or federal land. That's exempt from local ordinances. So we adopt whatever map comes up, state or federal decides on the properties. The next 2 are air property, which didn't change. It's just an exception. It's all family members. And the last one is petition, change of property. In other words, you move a property line around, don't create any new lots. Those are going to be considered administrative and actions when they come in, and everybody signed it, all the heirs have signed it, everybody's in agreement, 2 commissioners will sign it, and then it can be filed. Same thing with the petition, moving a property line around with no new lots is, falls under the exceptions. And the other thing I might add is, a lot of this came from capital area region, when the jury went out and had them look at the ordinance and stuff, so it came back from capital area, and we just kind of beefed it up and explained it better to give the people in the office more, I guess, definition is the best way to say it. Okay, one of the things that we added to the subdivision regulations is actually defined infrastructure. We talk about it all the time. Sewer, roads, drainage, culverts, electricity, all your utilities, that's all considered infrastructure. And sometimes it attacks schools or infrastructure. Not that we have a whole lot to do with schools, but it's part of infrastructure. The gas, the utilities, the water. And water is more and more an issue in the parish. And sewer is another one. So there's a definition of infrastructure in both of the regulations and the ordinance. Set the notification and hearing protocols in both the regulations and the ordinance. And it's the same protocols we've been using that the jury set up a year and a half ago. Who gets notification, what gets assigned, public notice for every piece of property, public hearings, that kind of thing. One of the changes is sets minimum three acre lots on servitudes, 30 foot wide, max 5 on servitude. Previously, it was 4 lots on servitude. State law allows 5. Recommended change to go up to 5, according to our state law. Set the servitudes at 60 feet for any developments with 5 to 20 lots. Anything over 5, in other words, 6 lots to 20 lots, can be on the servitude. And but it takes a 60-foot wide servitude to do that. Roads are required to be built in the servitudes now. There'll be no more drawings on a map with no road. There'll be a 3-year time limit before a final signature is done. The road has to be built. If you're going to divide property up into a servitude, you have to have a road before you can start selling lots or start pulling permits. Because the only way building material can get there is if there's a road built. And it's still yet to be determined on who's going to do the road inspections, but that's coming. And it's, right now, they can still be gravel roads if it's a small or minor subdivision. There'll be more on that tonight. The other thing is the parish sanitary signatures been taken off of both sets of maps. The only time you can get a sewer permit is the time of development. You have to have house plans before you can get a sewer permit. He doesn't need to get involved in surveys. It's not a whole lot to do. All it says on the map is going to be a standard note. Sewer permits required through Department of Health and Hospitals, parish sanitary, and at time of development. So that's pretty straightforward there. Now, before I get back into major subdivisions, any other commissioners have any issues with, because they've had a preview copy.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
In the president's new thing, he's talking about infrastructure, and one of the things he names in there is broadband. If we do not name broadband as part of our infrastructure, does that mean we wouldn't get any of the money, or we would not get that? Do we know that?
He names it as infrastructure, but we've never dealt with it in the past. We're more physical. Broadband is.
Okay. Well, no, I just wondered if we don't have it,
yeah,
and we don't name it as part of our infrastructure, and they send money and have that, like, 2 million dedicated for broadband, would we lose that 2 million?
No, we just came back from the Police Jury Association convention, and they talked about broadband extensively. There's a lot of money coming for broadband. They don't know how it's going to be partnered with, who's going to be the carriers and everything at this point, but they're going to feel, and the category they're talking about is not broadband as in, you're sitting in this building, which you probably get pretty good reception anyway. It's the outlying area, rural areas that have not only broadband, but they also call it dismal broadband. You pull your phone out, you got one dot maybe.
That's me.
Anybody else?
Everybody knows what I'm getting. The subdivision, moving to these servitude subdivisions we're doing, what's the advantage to the parish for going to 20 from the board's view, I say board view, but from the committee's view? What's the reason to move from 4 to 5 in one case, and then to actually allow it to 20?
Well, the 5 is what came down from capital area. We just left it that way as in 5 corresponded. Now, 20, there was discussion on the committee numerous times. Did we still want to consider that minor, or do you want to move it over to the major side? Because the other question I had, it's come to light since West Feliciana's redoing their subdivision thing, and we put roads have to be built. Do we really want to travel road for a 20-lot subdivision?
Well, and who's gonna maintain? So, your front man's gonna have, the front person in that subdivision is gonna have 20 other cars, 20 other households with average of 3 cars households, so they'll have 60 cars a day crossing. And the man in the back's gonna be fine, but where do we look at maintenance? Where does it come into burden of the police jury and the parish of a road that's gonna take maintenance and will have failure at some point for non-maintenance? You know, I don't understand the movement to that, you know. Everybody, most people know I'm fairly against the 4 because we still have a maintenance issue. I can bring you one right now that they're buried, they cannot get to the back of that, the last 2 lots in there right now. They've been like that all rainy season, they can't get it fixed. So what's the advantage? I'm asking from the committee's opinion, what's the advantage for the parish for that?
They were really expressed. That was something the previous committee had put in. They didn't see it taken out. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other members of the committee here tonight?
Just 2 of us. 3, 4, 5. I'm sorry.
So this was
Just one.
an agreement to do 20 by the whole committee?
Well, it depends on what the
It
issue
was-
was brought up. Other
Far as
times
I-
discussed.
Yes, as far as I can.
Okay.
Guys, y'all need to remember that the jury will not, and I'm looking this way, adopt any more roads unless it's a major subdivision and it's blacktop and done according to our major subdivision.
And that's-
So to answer your question, the parish will not accept any responsibility on a private servitude 60-foot wide.
And on that note, and I'm a lawyer, we can say we will not accept the responsibility, but there will come a point where you have all these people at the back of these subdivisions that you put 20 lots in there, you're gonna be a half mile long, you know, and on the least of the side there. So your half mile road with that many lots in it, that you can't really not accept it. I understand that it's the policy not to accept it, but you can't say, hey, we're just not gonna take the road over.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You
fine,
can say
I'm sorry.
that. And they have said that before, and they don't have the resources to maintain some of these roads, and they're probably gonna keep saying that until they get some more resources in.
So in the private servitude, it says right in there that that's for their private servitude for private maintenance. In other words, whoever buys a lot on there buys into this private maintenance thing. That's one of the issues that I had somebody call me about, and they preferred it, they would recommend that it go 20-lot subdivision, go to it, move over. In other words, their recommendation was if you're gonna do a 5-lot subdivision for resale, you're just doing a small development, take the roads, don't allow gravel, and move it over to infrastructure.
Remember
And-
this as well, trash trucks will not go down servitude. Mail person will not go down servitude. So you're gonna have 20 households of trash cans at the entrance. You're gonna have all the mailboxes at the entrance, they're not gonna go down. School
Water
buses
companies
will not go
run
down.
servitudes.
What's that?
Water company will not run forced water down servitudes.
And so you're gonna have
There's a lot of
all,
disadvantages to this.
line, either wells or whatever. So my thought on a 20 spot, I mean, you're gonna end up with what I call substandard neighborhoods all over the parish.
And my argument, it's been hard, you know, why aren't we pushing to have, even if it's a 4-lot subdivision, family property is a whole different ballgame, like, that's a whole different deal. Family property, why aren't we pushing, on these 4-lot subdivisions, why aren't we pushing to have paved roads? I mean, you developing property, I came from development, you're developing property to sell, there needs to be roads, infrastructure to these people, or it will become an issue. You know, Washington Parish had fits after Katrina. They had allowed a lot of that stuff happen, and you go in there and you have 20 lots go in there, and then all of a sudden you had people burying cars in the middle of the driveway because they went from not developed to developed, and it was bad, you know. There's one right across the parish line from St. Tammany, right on the right. That Washington Parish ended up having to take over. They put gravel road in, or it was a gravel road 4 years ago. But I don't understand why we're not pushing for a higher level of development. It's one thing to go in off a street or a road and add a 200 or 400 road frontage lot that's 10 acres deep. That's one thing to do as far as splitting up property and this property division stuff. But as far as if you're going to try to be development, it needs to be development. It doesn't need to be property division. And this is all my opinion on a servitude with no infrastructure. I can pay a surveyor to come out there. There's no engineering that goes in behind it. There's no nothing that's going in behind it. Now, I'm not downgrading surveyors by any means. They're doing their job. They're doing their purpose. But what are we looking at long term? These subdivisions turning into? Because you look, luckily, most of the ones that are being done right now are having $600,000 houses built in back up. There is, I mean, as things change, as people start flying this way, you're going to have people that can't afford them to build a $150,000 house. Those houses, before too terribly long, will be houses that anybody can afford that doesn't have the ability or the financial wherewithal to be able to maintenance those roads. That's where my concern, I mean, I'm against the floors. That's a whole nother discussion and a whole other topic we had that I have no idea why we would push to 20. Because you'll bury people back there in cost and everything else, and they just can't, you're gonna have people that can't afford it, you know?
You ever heard of due diligence?
Yes, sir.
Who's gonna buy something that they're not gonna get to? Are you gonna buy something back there that you can't get to?
Didn't we have this discussion at our last meeting?
Somewhat.
Because the people at the back, if the man ever decided to sell it, they wouldn't be able to get to their property because of the servitude that they had?
That was part of a different discussion, but that was, now, and I understand what you're saying, but you can go in there with a road that's not gonna be maintained by anybody. You're gonna have to rely on each one of those people. They're not gonna be set up where, they have homeowners associations and all that to maintain those
I
roads.
deal with this all the time. Done it for years and years and years. Your East Baton Rouge, Ascension, Livingston, all of them have, for years, have had a 5-lot private servitude with gravel roads in rural areas. All of them. Central, it's just very common.
I said I'm against a 5-lot. I did not say that's the discussion right now. I said that's another discussion for another time.
When you talk about roads and 5 lots, I can understand if you, I mean, I don't know the details about the 20 lots, okay? If you don't like that, it's fine. But everybody does 5 lots on private service. I live at the end of a private servitude, it's a half a mile long. I love it. I like being back. It's up to me and my neighbors to maintain that road. Central, for one, if you're gonna do a private servitude like that, they put on their covenant on the map. It's incumbent on everyone that buys one of these lots on a prorated basis to maintain this road for all the neighbors. The ditch is the road itself. You gotta have it with some certain dimensions so the fire truck can get back there and put out a fire. So, you know, you can't just throw everything, the baby out with the dirt or water. You gotta have some provisions for both sides of this thing. And to cause someone to have to put in an asphalt road to put on, to get to a little 5-lot subdivision, and that lot, you know, that could be a road 300 or 400 feet long, or it could be a mile long. It'd still just be 5 lots.
Right.
But the whole point is, if you're gonna buy a lot, you're looking at the map. If you're the one that's gonna be responsible for saying, hey, am I gonna be able to get to my property? Am I gonna be able to get a concrete truck back here to build a lot? Build a house? I mean, if you can't do that, it's not for this government to protect every little thing that the public can do. And you ought to have some options as private property owners for you and your family to do some of these things without having to incur huge developmental costs just because the planning commission or the public body doesn't, wants roads and infrastructure in for a little small suburb. And what I would say is, if you're so worried about that, why don't you go around this parish right now and fix some of these public gravel roads that we got and you can't get with one car down.
And that's the problem we're running into, is we have gravel roads that are maintained that are subpar. I mean, they are maintained, they're roads that have been maintained for decades. So what's to keep that road? I believe in adding this to it, personally, we're putting further down the road a financial burden that our residents and these people buying do not understand what they're getting into.
Well, the other thing is, Sam mentioned it, I think, Holy Street has no obligation to take upon itself a private subdivision. None whatsoever. Now, what most of these places do when we do a private servitude like that is they have a note on there that says, if you're gonna want any further development past here, you're gonna have to bring this road up to the standards of an asphalt road. Well, that's what I'm wondering. I don't know how you have it written up here, but if you've got a 30-foot private servitude for 5 lots, and you want to go through there to get to a bigger thing in the back, you're not going to be able to go back and give another 30 feet for a 60-foot right-of-way to get to those lots. So you've already choked yourself off unless you're thinking ahead and say, well, look,
Go 60 is fine.
go 60. And then if you want to do it, then you build the road according to the standards of asphalt, ditches, and all that stuff, put your infrastructure in. Holy Spirit wants to accept it, then they can, and then you can go further. I mean, that's just common stuff. Without incurring all that expense.
These are regulations you're making, aren't they?
Yes.
And you know that y'all don't have the authority to make the regulations. Y'all can make these things up and send them up to the village jury. They're going to be the ones.
That's not true.
According to
It
the
is
man
true.
that,
It's not true.
just a minute, according to the man that teaches this for the state, the lawyer for planning and zoning, his name escapes me right now. But according to him, petitions of property are governed by the police, by the planning and zoning, and they are strictly subdivision regulations for petitions of property. They don't go anywhere. They belong to planning and zoning.
33,
Right
12,
after that,
36,
it
14 of the revised statutes of Louisiana says you can't.
It's wrong.
Well, tell them down there in Baton Rouge and maybe they'll fix it.
Being split, regulations and orders. We checked with our legal advisor, he said that was the way to go.
Is that the way it goes?
Well, what are y'all here tonight to do? Just y'all are gonna.
We're going to roundtable to see how the regulations, the way the committee left them, to see if planning and zoning's happy with them. And then the ordinance part of it will go up to the police jury.
Okay, and.
Regulations will go on the next agenda for planning and zoning, how we do small maps.
And just for the record, you don't need planning and zoning's approval to do any of that. You don't have to get it approved by planning and zoning and then send it to the police jury. It's a police jury ordinance, and the police jury can amend their ordinance if they want to amend that.
Ordinance is separate from the subdivision regulations. The statute says that the planning commission shall adopt regulations. It tells them they have to.
You're
So
correct.
shall.
You're correct about that, but they're already in place. They're already set in place.
No,
They're
there's an
governed by the
ordinance
police
in place. There's not regulations. That's what he's trying to do here, separate regulations from ordinance, which would govern what the police jury has to do with, which which is infrastructure, and taking over public ownership of roads and that type of thing. That's the only thing they're involved with. Right now, they're approving maps that they don't even look at, which is contrary to state law right now.
And you have a subdivision ordinance that's in place right now, that is in place. That's what they were asked. They were asked, this committee was asked to restrict or put a moratorium on the building so they can regulate it to the extent that we would have smart growth in the parish. And what this committee did, and I was on the committee, and some other people were on the committee, all it's gonna do is just open it up where you're gonna have growth everywhere. And the Planning and Zoning Committee, who sent a map to the police jury last week or week before last that was inappropriate and incorrect, and asked the jury to approve it, that's the people that you're gonna ask to regulate or have smart growth in the parish.
There's an approval process in here by them, and anyone can appeal it. It's in the statute, Sam, all you gotta do is read it. But the police jury can't even overturn it by a simple majority, it has to be a 2/3 majority.
I'm just kind of figuring out why we're here tonight. You know, you don't have to get approval from the planning and zoning for the subdivision ordinance. If Mr. Rushan wanted just to explain the new ordinance to y'all, that's fine. You know, you can't take any action on it, obviously. If you want to explain it to them, explain it to them.
And that's what we're doing.
That's what he's doing.
And
The law
I'm
says you have
getting
to have
there.
a public hearing before you can take action on it.
Yeah.
It's all clearly put in.
And that's why you're there, and they have a legal advisor over here. So I'm saying that all y'all can do is talk about it tonight. This isn't a public hearing.
No, it's
You can't
not.
vote on it. The
You didn't
commissioner
say it
votes.
was.
We know it's a roundtable, we're getting input from the commissioners, so when it gets to the commissioners next week on the agenda, we'll have a fairly clean copy of regulations. I mean, we do have a couple that are missing, but one told me she had no problem with what we had written and drafted up for regulations. The ordinance has got to go to public hearing anyway. Yes, ma'am.
And how many people on the committee voted to bring this forward, that it was ready?
We went through the whole thing.
How many people voted after it was done that it was ready for presentation anywhere?
We didn't vote on it. We finished the review of it, so,
That would be my point, Dale.
okay.
Has the committee?
The entire committee reviewed this thing. So,
And you were done with it, and now you turned it over to the planning commission.
that was the
Which
next
is the whole
logical
idea,
step.
right?
That's the whole idea of this. Get
Well,
it
the
to the
planning
planning and
commission-
zoning, because planning and zoning has to recommend
Now you're
any
gonna-
changes
now
to
you're
the
gonna
planning and
discuss.
zoning ordinance or anything else.
And that's incorrect, Mr. Rushan. And so with that, I was just thinking that y'all were gonna set it up, you try to vote on something tonight, but you tell me you're not gonna vote on it.
No, it wasn't on the agenda to vote on anything, Sam.
Good luck.
Why don't you read the agenda?
I did read the agenda, Mr.
Did you say they were gonna take action?
Let's get back to our discussion so we can finish this up. Okay, back to your point, Josh. I mean, you're not the only one that has that issue with the 20 lots. We talked about it during the thing. Several of us didn't have purview whether you left 20 lots minor or considered it major. The time it's gonna be minor is when it's all along a public road or no servitude.
And that is a different beast in its own hand.
Exactly, and and in the regulations, it gives the commission leeway to, if we get to one that comes in, somebody developing 20 lots of the minor, we can send it to public hearing and send it to the jury for approval. Now, the other thing I didn't mention before was major subdivision, or, maybe I did, yeah, roads are required to be built in the servitude form. I don't care what size, if there's a servitude, you have to have a road in it before it gets its final approval, period. They got 3 years to build that road. If you don't build it for 3 years, you start over. Come back to the zone, planning and zoning with a new map.
You can't sell a lot until
You
you.
can't sell a lot till you get a road built, because the people can't build a house along that servitude without a road there.
What's the standard of the road?
Stand now. Depends on how many lots it was. It was either 30, they're still thinking gravel for servitude. Now, I had other input since we finished up this final thing. Leave that for family petitions, gravel option. If a developer's gonna come in here and create a 5-lot subdivision, the developer needs to put in paved road.
For 5 lots?
For 5 lots.
Never happen. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
We've done it.
You'll never sell lots.
It's got, if it's under 3 acres, it's gonna require sewer anyway. That's not-
I would think a lot smaller, they wouldn't have to worry about partitions, would be enough room.
I would think you could, if y'all are concerned about it, I'd just throw out the 20. Keep it at 5 and then keep it smaller like that.
I'm gonna address something you just said about it's too expensive. All around the rest of the state, you're dealing with, hey, we've developed as small as 4 and 5 lots on small acreage. We put in roads to them. You know, that is the way it's done. It's possible.
Sure, it's possible with money.
In the value of land here
Put
versus
that on
central is
someone.
very different.
I absolutely understand that, but you're also dealing with a different population here. You're dealing with a different, central's not rural anymore. This is rural here. What is the advantage to not having it here? Expense doesn't, you're developing a piece of property, that should be taken into effect to the development of the property. It's an expense. If you
You're
decide
tying the hands of many people that want to do that.
then you don't spend it.
Well, then you never develop and we just stay.
That's right.
Right.
And you're not, and it's not just developers doing it, it's not just families most of the time. It's mostly families.
I'm
that are
saying,
doing
says
this.
families nothing to do with this. Family property division is a whole different beast.
It
I
should
don't-
be though.
But
It should be,
it is.
it should be a small
Family-
thing, but
family
you can
property.
do it whether it's family or not.
Family property is a different beast. If you had 200 acres that you needed to divide 50-50-50, I think we should be 60-foot servitude in case that person in the back wants to make a 50-acre subdivision out of it at some point. I think that ought to be available for them. But family property is a completely different beast than people dividing property, not particularly developing, but dividing property for monetary gain.
I definitely disagree like this.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the 30-foot roadway in that 5 lot, does that include utility servitude, or is the utility servitude in addition to the 30 feet?
Utilities don't require, they're not in the servitude per se. In other words, utility companies, because on servitude, water's not gonna run there. And you get electrical to run, electrical will take their 30 feet anywhere they want. That's part of being an electrical company, I guess. They run right down through your property. And you can't build within 15 feet of that line. Anything, no structure
Okay,
involved.
but she was saying something earlier about, internet, AT&T, what about telecommunications, servitude and things like that?
That would be across the property owner, that's between the utility and the property owner. Because on most of our property anyway, you have servitude runs through your property, you're not giving up property, you still own it. You own that piece of
Yeah,
servitude.
no, I understand that.
But and a lot of things that we're discussing was gonna require a lot more too. You're not gonna dig a ditch for fiber and put it in. You're not gonna put fiber up on a pole.
Yeah, I was
That
just,
discussion
you
was
only
held
have
too.
like 30 feet though, and your lots are on either side, and then, you jut into, and there's no provision for that on the original plans.
Then if it's in the 60-foot one, it's in there.
Yeah.
60-foot gives you enough room for a road and servitude, or any utility servitude. So, I mean, anybody else have anything on the size of the servitude? Yes, sir.
Mr. Oakland is right, if you've got a property and you've got 10 kids or 15 kids, if it's big enough, you can split it up to 15 different pieces, and they all have access to it.
Yes, sir.
And there's no way to fix that. It's just the way it is.
Well, that's the way that should be.
Well, that's the way the law is.
That's the way that should be. I think we should make it where that back person can, if they want to put a subdivision back there, make it big enough. I think the servitude should be big enough for that. But we can't do anything with family division on property.
Why can't you?
Why should we?
Well, you've got all kinds of shoulds in what you're saying.
Absolutely.
We should do road, we should do this. Why?
If you had
There's no
100 acres,
regulations in East Baton Rouge, Central Zachary for families. They can't do anything special that anyone else can do. Why? Why?
you divide the property amongst neighbors.
They should have to follow the same rules as anybody else.
And I just said that if they want to develop the property in the back, they need to put a 60-foot servitude. That's my opinion there. Right now, they would do a 30-foot servitude. I understand that.
That's the minimum.
Right.
30 foot's the minimum.
Well, is there a minimum for five? I mean, if it's a family and I've got 10 kids, are you saying I could put in a 30-foot servitude for all of them? Are you gonna approve it, or you gonna say, well, do what you wanna
But,
do?
all right, let me give you a hypothetical here. That comes to the thing. You got 10 or 12 kids in a family. On a hypothetical, you're doing 50 acres. So they're gonna have 4 lots, basically, 48 acres. They're gonna have 4 lots, 12 kids. It would be the planning and zoning's recommendation, especially if it's what's behind it. If it's not another road that gets close or another big chunk of property, you got 12 people on that road already. Cut your 60-foot servitude to start with.
So you're gonna make them do it? You're not gonna let them just say, well, just for
You
a
can't
family?
do 30, because if you got 12 people, you're not doing 30 foot.
Well,
I mean,
that's what I'm saying, though, is
because
there gonna be a different regulation for a family partition as for the regular public?
It's.
That's not done anywhere else I know
The minimum is,
of. I mean, whether you're
Yeah.
family or not, you gotta follow the rules.
Yes.
Whatever the rules are.
yes, to answer your question.
Okay.
Now, what's the consensus as far as planning and zoning? Y'all wanna keep 20 lots in the bottom and the minor stuff, or you wanna move it over to major? Call it major. I don't have an axe, I don't have a horse in this fight, I'm just chair.
We discussed this long and hard, and I thought it was the consensus of the committee that the minor subdivision, proposal was a good proposal, both for the parish and for the development. Since this discussion here, I'm having second thoughts.
Okay, hang on just a minute. Yes, sir, Mr. Howe.
Mr. McMorris, how is that better that way? Now,
Well,
you might be a major and you wanna make it a minor. You've got more control over the majors than the minors.
In my opinion, it made it easier for a developer to develop a lot, to develop a small subdivision.
Yeah, but
And yet still-
is that the point of this thing, to make everything easy
No,
and do this
no, it's
and do
not,
that?
Richard. It's not.
We're in a tight spot now. People are just killing themselves to get up here, and I can't figure out why.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask you this, we're talking about 4 and 5 lots as a family petition.
No, we talking about 5 lots on servitude, but
Okay.
family is like, Josh said, that's something else. Family is an exception anyway.
Okay, so how do we get them, is this about separating that?
No, five lots
I
on
mean, the
servitude.
family petition from the subdivision petition.
No, that's a different animal. Family is governed by, most of the time they go to do a succession, and a succession says, when that judge says to pass a succession, everybody's gonna get an equal share.
So that's in those exceptions you were talking about on the
Yes.
back.
That's
The 3
it.
that the court do, 2
Exactly.
through 4.
Judge, once they do a succession, and everybody's getting an equal piece of the pie, then they're gonna have to go by the rules. You draft a map, cut it all up. Hopefully, it's in kind of symmetrical lots, not like some of ours are. Cut to get an even split with 10 people.
And so if they had 10 people that all got 50 acres, they would still go by the family petition rules and not
They're
the.
family petition, but they're still gonna have to, they got 10 people on there now, it's 4 to 5 lots, you get 60 feet.
So that's when it changes over
You're
once.
gonna
it
go
goes.
60 feet because you might have, Blairstown might be back up on, you have 1,200 acres back there, a piece of land, or Beach Grove, or whoever.
And much of the time on family petition, very seldom do we run into a family petition issue where every bit of it is divided off the servitude. Most of the time, you have road frontage on family petition. So it becomes a rarity where you end up with 12 thrown down a servitude, you know? It's a rarity.
I can think of one real quick, but
Right,
it's
right.
popped up.
But-
And we had 7 off of a previous divide, added 7 more pieces on servitude. Yes, it.
I would, just for the public sake too, Josh, you asked where's the benefit? Our attempt wasn't to create a perfect document, because you're not gonna get one.
that's why we're.
We've been dealing since '86 with these issues, you know, and there's a lot of problems with them. But I've been trying to tell the jury and other people, whatever we come up with is gonna be a well of a lot better than what we have now. But don't adopt this new ordinance or regulations and then walk away and don't look at it for another 30 years. Now, as problems come up, you're gonna have to stop, address it, change it, adopt, and move on, as they're finding out with solar farms and hemp extraction and all the stuff that's new. So, to your answer back to these servitudes and stuff, why are we doing it? Two things. Number one, on the private servitudes. Number one, the first thing is we've been operating, to me, unconstitutional, where it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. That you could do a development, 4 lots off a private servitude, but then you were forbidden by our ordinance to ever do that again in the rest of your life. Well, no one's ever challenged it in court. Of course, you can do it to the challenge. Been hearing from a lot of juries, we need to throw that out years ago. So that's the first thing we're trying to get away from. It's not a once-in-a-lifetime thing. The second thing is, and it's a huge thing, right now, these servitudes for how long since 1986 have been, there's just been lines on the paper. We've got goat trails out there with no oversight of roads or anything. So you can do 4 lots, as you know now, Josh, with lines on the paper, and if you can sell them, more power to you. You can have a grass lane going through a pasture, getting the 4 lots, and you can get permits and build houses on it right now. Been that way since 1986. So now at least, what we're saying, and the minimum wide servitude is 25 feet for those. So now we're saying, go to 30 feet, which, like Skip said, everywhere else is 5. So we upped it 1, you can do 5 off of it, but now you gotta build a road. And our civil engineer, Boyd Holmes, that was on it, there'll be a design in there, whatever that is for the 30 foot. I don't remember if it's 20 foot, 22 foot wide. I don't know if it gives you an option, you know, with the base and the gravel and the limestone and whatnot. And you're gonna have a cross section in there, and you're gonna have to build it, like J.R. said. The road's gonna have to be built, so it comes in front of them, they adopt it, you got your approval, but you can't get your permit till that road's built. You got a 3-year window. I think that's East Battery Parish is a 2 or 3 year window. 3-year window, I think. No, I know, but I mean, you get approved, and you gotta do the road, and the approval's good for 3 years to build a private road.
Well, you can't sell lots to you build. They're not gonna give you final approval.
I understand that, but your approval's done.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. You come in here, your map's approved, now you gotta go build the road. So I'm pointing out for the public to hear all this, what's the advantage? Right now, you don't have to build no road. You got lines on the paper, so we're widening it another 5 feet to 30 feet. We're doing away with that once-in-a-lifetime thing. Now, whoever it ends up being, our building inspector, they create a new job, a road or something, you go out there and you're inspecting the road. So now, Josh, the things you're complaining about, I know they're all over the place. People get stuck, you can't get back there. Well, that's with no oversight right now, no regulation whatsoever. At least now you're gonna have a road design, be it true, it's not a concrete road, but an asphalt road. But I would say anyone would have to say that's a well of a lot better than what you got now, because you got zip right now. So that's on the 30 foot and up to 5, and that addresses that. Moving it on up to 15 to, the 5 to 20, same thing J.R. said, Mr. McMorris said. You know, that's open to, if someone thinks, if you get over 6 lots, that needs to go to the ordinance and let the police jury more eyes see on it, because this whole idea of infrastructure, you know, it's kind of a general thing, if it affects infrastructure. Well, a lot of things affect infrastructure. It doesn't just have to be new. So that's what he's talking about. As people move up here, and okay, we're going to do 15 lots back there. It's all existing. Could be even on the existing road, but that's going to affect infrastructure. So that's still the hanging question. Do you want more than 5 lots, even on a public road, to go to the whole jury, so you can bring more people to the table on the front end, so developers and stuff can know what they're looking at? Is this going to affect the water pressure in the area, or what you're going to do with the sewer and stuff? So as far as the number, whatever that magic number is, that it needs to go to the police jury and consider that under the subdivision ordinance. You know, that's what I would have thought. I'm just saying all this so everybody here. That has been some of the discussions, and not just for these last several months. That's discussions been going on up here for 5 or 6 years. Yeah, a long time we've been talking about this.
And I'll just, since evidently not everybody knows, we do have a building inspector. Jeff Williams has been hired as our chief building official. So, just so you know, we do have one.
And then the only other thing I'll push in a second here, but the 30-foot servitude and then the 60-foot servitude, you're right. If you went, you know, you got 30 foot to 5, and then you're gonna do another 15 to go up to the 20, now you gotta jump up to 60, but now you gotta have, you either gotta go back and convince those 5 property owners if you want to buy more servitude, or you're just gonna be dead in the water right there. There was a discussion, do we not have any 30-foot servitudes, do we make them all 60 for that reason? On all these maps, it's on the front end, so if anyone buying, it's been that way since 1986, it says on there on private servitudes. This is not gonna be kept up by the police jury, so property owners, when they wanna buy, they know. You can go complain, I had juries for years, the police jury would say, oh, we get all this pressure people wanna say. I said, well, there's a little word you need to learn how to say. No. If you tell people on the front end, this is not gonna be a public road, if they buy under that, I understand complaining, but you let them know, no. Now, Sam's position has been, and you just heard him before he left, you don't have to take those roads in. He then was talking about these private roads. And I don't want to speak for him because I think he left. But on this committee, his position, from what I understood, was still, they don't even have to accept these like a hidden point that just was taken in. Even if you build it to their standards, his position was, unless I heard him wrong, that the jury still has the option not to take them in. And I think Mr. Hall, they had that discussion when hidden point came up and said, you can't tell a man to build it to our standards, oversee it, and then when it's all said and done, say, look, we ain't gonna take it in. So that's some of the issues that I know they're dealing with, the jury. But anyhow, I'm just trying to give everyone else some thought, the thought press behind this, and try to address some of your why, what's better. Well, that's why some of it's better.
And I did, and I was on a major subdivision. And we set the standards in our ordinance. It said the road has to be this. It has to be engineered, stamped. It's a blacktop road with all the drainage. We set the rule. The guy did everything he was supposed to. We can't set a rule and not adopt it. But my question is this. What y'all setting tonight, what are you calling it? Regulations?
The subdivision regulations. And
So
that's primarily going to be petition property, not roads, not infrastructure, with the extension of private servitude.
I understand.
Whatever number we cut.
Okay, so if your regulation says, if y'all adopt, if the planning and zoning adopts a regulation that says we can put in 20 lots on a private servitude, and it totally contradicts our ordinance, so who wins this battle?
No, that's gonna be separated out, ordinance is gonna be another part. If you don't want the 20 lots, just take it out, just leave the option
That's
of
where we're
5.
at right now. Before we
You
go
say
any
anything
further,
over 5 lots gonna have
let's
to
get
have
the
the roads and
consensus
all that
of the
stuff.
planning and
Go to
zoning,
y'all,
we're gonna
and
recommend.
y'all have to accept that.
And my only question is we have regulations or whatever you call them, and ordinances.
That's
And
right.
they want to separate.
That's
What
right.
if they contradict themselves?
Well, they're not, that's what I'm trying to address right
The
now.
whole point is,
Guys,
the ordinance
I've
is,
been sitting here for 15 years, and we came up with new ordinances, and y'all are witnesses. I put it up for public hearing how many times? Never got a second. Never got a second. So many times that I said I'd never do it again, because I look like an idiot. So do y'all honestly think that these new ordinances are gonna come to our table and pass?
Well, Chris, because of the history and being my brother, and you know better than anyone, everyone's been optimistic. Mr. Kent's been like you're optimistic. Now, my answer to that has been, I believe it when it's passed.
So I'll ask again. You set all these regulations. You need to look at what we have today.
Yes, sir.
Because let me go on and tell you, that's what you're gonna have tomorrow. And if they contradict each other, what then? That's my question.
And if you're saying regulations are separate from ordinances,
That
is that
means-
given planning and zoning the right to make all this decisions?
A
on
regulation will be
regulations?
approved by the planning and zoning board.
Regulation.
And we'll never see it.
no. Basically, all they're gonna be doing is what they've been doing all these years. Y'all have very few major developments like Hidden Point. I mean, what, we had 2 or 3 in the last.
But we're
8
gonna
years?
have more because
But
we
that,
see
this
what's
Right.
happening.
that's
That's
gonna
all
fall
come
under
to
your
you.
ordinance.
And that's what we're trying, one of the things.
What they're gonna do is they're gonna look at the zoning and say, okay, the zoning governs sides of lots and frontages. They're gonna look at it and say, well, this all complies. We're gonna approve the stuff that's minor, And if it's major, we're gonna say, okay, this complies with our regulations, and send it to y'all for your approval of the infrastructure. And you're gonna have an engineer or someone coming to you like they did on Hidden Point, say, yes, they did this, they built the road to these specifications, they did this. And both the police jury and the commission always have the option of denying something on the basis of health, welfare of the public, the safety and welfare
But
of the
once
public.
they've approved it, the jury will be taking, the elected people from the parish will have absolutely no say-so to undo what the plan.
No, it
is.
can be appealed to y'all. The statute says it can be appealed to you, but you can only overturn their decision by a 2/3 vote, not a simple majority. It's in the statute.
So P&Z will have full authority to approve anything up to 20.
If that's what they're
Right
agreeing
now.
on.
If that's the number, but that ain't what.
We never come up with,
Mr. Lewis, what you got?
we never came up with a number, we never did. But first of
Where did
all,
20 come from?
it's just discussion, but never come up with a number.
But he's saying that all voted and approved
I'm
on
not,
it.
That's what we talked about through every meeting. We had it, everybody had it in front of them. If you didn't read it, I'm
So you
sorry.
had one of your
What you
committee members
said-
saying it was never done. The 20 was talked about and never agreed upon, but you're bringing 20 to the table right now. As a solid number.
And what you said was that 20 was an arbitrary number that we as a committee would address, and you never allowed it to be readdressed.
Wait, but I believe, there's a lot of, look, there's nobody in this room knows the history of this stuff more than me and my brother. We've been on these committees now for 6 years. I mean, I'm not trying to overstep you, Mr. Kent. I mean, I know you've been around here a lot longer than me. I'm talking about deep into this stuff. So,
So can y'all table the 20 right now and just stick?
well,
with it?
the 20 and all the discussion is over about 5 or 6 years, untold godly amount of committee members, capital area region. So the whole point of what we're talking about is nothing set in stone. But that's where the 20 has come from on probably, goodness gracious, 50 people on committees over these years, different people, capital region and stuff, on that number. I'm not set on that number. I don't think there's anyone in this room that's set on that number. And we're not presenting it like take the 20 or not.
In this room that's set on that number.
we never started.
Well, there's no one person gonna approve this thing. It's just for them to discuss, to come up with, then there's gotta be a public hearing before they make any action. That's why I don't know what Sam was coming up with. You can't have an action without a public hearing. It's gotta be advertised and everything
All I'm
else.
saying is, and I'll leave it there, there's a reason why if you cross Thompson Creek, they made 4 or more coming up to be a major subdivision.
Well, hey, here's the deal.
We're getting these developments over here, and that's what y'all should have been concentrating on, was the major developments. And touching on something like that, upping it from 4 to 20, and even considering it is ridiculous. Because if you think that that's not going to eventually be a burden on the police jury, then sit here and answer the phone or come to a meeting.
Well, if that's a
Hold on.
consensus, throw it
Every
out.
time that we have to tell a widow who 25 years ago, her husband was able to maintain the road, but she's not now. 20 years ago, when she moved on that private servitude, she had someone to help her.
If
We
I
have to
may-
tell them every week, I'm sorry, private servitude, we can't help you. So.
Well, Jody, if I
it
may,
will
right
be a
now,
burden on
just so
them.
everybody understands, right now, and Mr. Howell, God bless you, we just never gonna see eye to eye on this, the regulation stuff and how I read statutes and Skip read statutes. And what we see is very clear by state statute on what planning commissions have sole authority to, which is what we're trying to talk about when we say these regulations. And not trying to circumvent over the police jury, which is the elected body, but go back and read the statute. But right now, I'd like any jury to say they're looking at any of these maps that they want to see it. The only reason these juries are looking at any of these maps right now because they're scared to death, and Sam just said it, and it all comes from the Dudley lawsuit and that mess. I don't have any idea. I never looked at those maps. I don't know how it got screwed up. But on these private servitudes, that's straight. I mean, that's what's there to screw up. You look at it, okay, if you adopt the 5, that's a private servitude. Planning Commission by state statute has complete authority to approve it. The buck stops with them. You file it, you move on down the road. They get all these maps. The jury ain't looking at not one of these maps. They get 10 maps on there and say, and Chris will say, let's approve A through E. Okay, yeah, boom, boom, it's done. They're only doing it because they're scared to death they're going to get sued because of another Tommy Dudley deal. And nobody can say I'm wrong on that. It's the only reason they're
I
doing
can.
it.
You made me look like a fool once, you won't do it again. I look at those maps.
great.
Y'all got me once. You won't do it again.
Okay?
Y'all ain't
Let me
even-
ask you this. God bless you then if you are. Get the other 8 standing up here and tell me how many of those look at these maps every time.
Yeah, he leans over, he looks at him, and he leans over to me and he said, "Do you see anything?" And I said, "No, do you?" "Nope, we're good to go."
Okay, great. Chris, do you look at all these maps?
I've looked at some of them.
You look at all of them?
I've looked at some of them.
Okay. My point is, I'm not trying to chastise y'all. My point is, you talking to the wrong person about that kind of stuff. I know what y'all look at and don't look at. The point is, y'all don't want to look at those things. You want them to approve what's got to be approved. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong with somebody in here. We're in a public booth. Throw it out there. The only reason you're seeing these maps or wanting to see these maps because you're trying to avoid another lawsuit or situation that y'all say these people that you trounce on these people. I just heard somebody, I forgot who it was. The elected people go, these people that sacrifice their time and spend all their time by state law that are appointed. Some other parishes can get a little payment out of it, but not this parish. So, I mean, I'm not trying to jump on anybody's feet here. I'm just trying to say out loud so everybody understands how this thing is working. So y'all see these maps, you're not perusing through them is what I'm saying like they are. But what we're trying to do is by cleaning this stuff up, you're doing away with the possibility of a Tommy Dudley thing. And as far as the 20, that's just a number. I'm fine with doing the 5 like it is. Everything above 5 on a public road or whatever, go to the full jury, go to what, look at the infrastructure and what. That's just a number.
I just don't want to see a regulation and an ordinance turn into the police jury not issuing permits because we got conflict. And that's what's gonna happen, is because if our ordinances stand the way they are, and your regulations pass, and you're approving this, and then these folks show up here, the police jury is gonna say, that contradicts our ordinance, you're not getting a permit. I already know how this is gonna play out.
Well, that's what the committee did, Chris. They had an engineer on it that does this all the time. And they tried to do that so there wouldn't be conflict. They're not perfect. If you come up with something, fix it.
All right, let me ask you a question. The last set of ordinances that we did, by far not perfect, but were better than what we originally had. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Could not get a second.
I know.
5 times.
Chris, one of
Just
the,
for a public hearing.
I know, one of those issues was, the man that kept blocking you all the time wanted to have, from the old ordinance to the new ordinance, with all the strikeouts and capital area bled in there and everything else. That's been done.
JR, it wasn't one man, it was 8 men.
Yeah, but one
It was
man
a jury
convinced the
as a
rest of
whole.
the majority, yeah.
And I can promise you this, when the phone calls start coming to Chrissy, to Mr. Lewis, to me, why are y'all, to Kyle, why are y'all passing an ordinance with, or passing something with this? Ya. Remember the last time in my district, when something came up that had more than 5 lots on a private servitude, you couldn't even stand in this room, there was so many people.
Mr. Hall, may I?
Yes, sir.
It doesn't make any difference whether you look at them or don't, you're gonna get sued anyway, because y'all are the police jury. You need to try to figure out a way to deflect some of that stuff off to the planning and zoning, so they'll be more careful.
Well, if we can push the brakes a little bit too, come June 23rd, if all works out, we'll have a parish engineer on staff. So put the brakes on it and let's.
Okay,
somebody
back
actually
to
look at
the
it,
original.
the jury.
Put the brakes on what?
Back to the original, wait a minute, before y'all get any more side discussions, back to the original thing. What's the consensus of the zoning people sitting at this table up here on 20 lots?
Scrap it.
So I got 1 vote for going, pushing it to the majors. Anybody else?
Scrap it.
Major?
I agree.
Major? 20 lots goes to the majors, that's all, that's simple, that's the consensus of the planning and zoning.
4, where's the line?
5 lots is by state standards, it came from capital area. The reason it went from 4 to 5 was capital area eroded that way. None of these committees changed it, they didn't evolve, it's right by the, yeah.
Right. A question for clarification. So we're talking about more than 5 lots, whether it's on a private servitude or existing public road, that's going to be considered major, right?
Major.
Yes.
Okay, no point out, we've just been strictly talking about servitude, so on anything. And let me just say this so folks around here understand. In East Baton Parish and other places for years, it's been that way. You can do 5. So you know how you get away around that thing? You do 4, and the remainder might be 100. So there's your 5th lot. And in East Baton Parish, when you have a paid staff, so they approve it on staff level. Then you know what you do? You turn right back around, the remainder, you do 4 and a remainder. So I'm saying, no matter how well you think some things out, there's gonna be some things you're gonna look at after the fact and go,
And we talked about that on the committee too. It's already been said about a living document. If we get some high thinker in here that gets away to find a loophole in this and shoot it, we can go back and fix it. The jury's gonna have to go back and make adjustments to the ordinance. It's probably not gonna stand for, see, the last one was 2009. It's not gonna stand 12 years again before it has another change to it.
We trying to stay all along. We got to distinguish between a major subdivision and a minor subdivision. That was the biggest fault, fight right there.
And 20 lots just moved up.
Moved up to a major subdivision.
So that's going back.
I want to address something else right quick. All right, so currently, we can't, once we do the 4, we're stuck, right?
5 years.
Once we do, once where we're currently, once we do the 4, we can't redivide again.
That's right.
So we're talking about removing the division where we can divide again. That's what's being talked about being removed. So that's where we get into the weeds with.
No, he's talking about that once in a lifetime. One guy can only do one servitude. If he buys 20 acres somewhere else, he can't divide it.
Okay.
Because he's got one servitude in a
Already
lifetime.
owns it.
That disappears.
That's the one lifetime.
We were told by the jury was told by their own lawyer that was unconstitutional. He was losing for him. He could not defend it.
Mr. Michelle,
Yes, ma'am.
if we're moving 20 to the police jury
Yes.
and 5 here,
I think our ordinance says.
You move it 6, anything above 5 to the.
Okay,
6 and above.
so if we're making the regulations for 5 and below, how is that going to cross over and be adverse to the ordinances if we don't deal with the ordinances of the 20? If the only thing we're dealing with is 5 and below, how could what we do with those 5 and below?
Our ordinance says 4 today.
Y'all are just approving geometrics.
That's what I'm asking. I'm trying to figure
They
out how
don't
we can
approve
go
the
up there
geometrics. The
and there seems
ordinance
to be
is
a
not to
concern
do
about
that.
us crossing
Y'all
over
are
into their
gonna-
ordinances.
Y'all are, I don't know why he's so concerned about that, because y'all are gonna look at the zoning and see what size lots are minimum for that zone, whether it be area or front.
Mr. Smith, I'll tell you why I'm so concerned with it, because when this passes and our ordinance, the new ordinance change doesn't, and they approve a 5-lot
The new ordinance
subdivision,
change-
and our ordinance still says 4, this office is not gonna issue permits.
The new ordinance is that y'all are gonna be dealing with, is not gonna deal with the geometrics that they're gonna be approving.
So you're
Oh,
saying
you're-
they're gonna make decisions that we can't have
So you're
anything to
saying
do
that
with?
Anyone can appeal any decision they
But
have
it's gotta be
to
through an
you.
appeal process.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is our minor subdivision won't have an ordinance anymore? Our minor
It's just
subdivision
regulations, all they're
ordinance.
gonna be doing is what the state law says they're supposed to be doing, approving subdivision of property. Do they have the right size lots? Yes. Do they have the right frontage? Yes. It's just like you said, if they're doing it right, you gotta say yes.
Yes.
So they say yes. Now, if it's a major subdivision like Hidden Point, and they have an engineer that's come in and done preliminary drainage and roads and all that, they're gonna say, look, the lots look good, now y'all take it. If you don't like it, if you don't like the way they're doing the streets or whatever, that's up to y'all. We're done with it.
That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is today, right today, we got our minor subdivision ordinance, says 4 lots on private servitude, right or wrong?
Right.
So we're gonna say our new
I understand what you're saying.
factor, we're gonna do 5. Well, when the new ordinances come to us and they fail, your factor says 5, y'all gonna approve a map with 5 lots, and it's gonna go, because it don't even have to come to us.
All right.
But we still have a minor subdivision ordinance that says 4, permits are not gonna be issued.
That's gonna have to be changed.
All right,
If you don't change it, then I guess
I'll
you're
go out
gonna,
on
y'all
that.
gonna make the conflicts. by not-
This is easy. I'll go out on a limb. We're gonna be optimistic and say it's gonna pass, but if you cut it down, and it goes to 4, all right, I live on the bright side. I'm sunshine all day today, it's just like,
Well, hey, Chris.
if it goes to, if y'all shoot down the ordinance, then we can come back to planning and zoning and change 5 to 4 with a vote of simple majority. Guess what? It's that easy. To go back to 5 to 4, if you march down the ordinance.
Yes.
If you're against the floor, I'm against the floor.
First of all, y'all make recommendations and regulations. The jury set the law. Y'all cannot make an order. Only the jury can make the law cut there. Only the jury.
But
not paying it down.
if they saying a factor, or whatever it is, doesn't have to come to the jury, that was my first question. Does it supersede an ordinance?
First of all, in the new ordinance, Mr. Paul, it's gonna be 5 laws. That's the agreement become 5 laws, right? And anything on 5, they make it safe. They cannot take 5.
I understand what you're saying.
We got that.
But if
We
the
got
factors are agreed upon,
Right.
and this is what the planning and zoning is gonna operate by,
Right.
but our ordinances, the new ordinances don't pass.
They don't pass.
How many times have you and I seen them not
That's
pass?
quite true.
What are we doing?
You said one thing more.
We're not gonna do anything on planning and zoning that's not according to the Polish jury ordinance. Okay? If we recommend 5, y'all,
It don't pass.
and y'all
that's the
shoot
fault.
it down, then we're gonna do 4. That's all we're gonna do. We're gonna follow the law.
I understand, but what we're saying here is we're separating ordinances and regulations. And if it's a regulation that they can approve 5 without the jury, or 5 up to 20, whatever it
No,
was.
5. Stop.
Actually, approving of all is more than 5 too. They're the only ones that can approve the geometrics of the thing.
I can promise you this.
Y'all can shoot down the other part of it.
I understand
What you
that,
want
but
to do, I said,
this
right?
is what I don't understand. We're saying a regulation, but we have an ordinance that says something else. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, this is the world I live in. You have ordinances right now that will be your ordinances next week, and the next week, and the next week. So the regulations need to operate off of what we have. I said this 2 years ago, and I'll say it again today. I will not make a motion ever again to put any new ordinance up for a public hearing. I will not do it.
So you're saying the police jury is not gonna pass anything?
I don't think they would.
Even though you have now this committee has put all this time and effort into also going into the ordinances and updating the specifications for roads and stuff that are 40 years old. They're still gonna leave it like
How
it
much
is.
time did they spend on the last one?
Well, I was hoping to be a little more optimistic.
I'm not
I guess we're
optimistic
stuck with the
at
same
all.
thing.
Ms. Howard, I'm very optimistic. I worked on this committee with the, it's time for a change. Change coming. People afraid of change, but change is coming. And you're not going to make it stop change.
All right, Mr. Jeff, you got the last, two comments. Go ahead, Jeff.
Just one more thing, Mr. Howe, I ain't pointing you out, but we've been disagreeing this for a long time. Chris, you're asking the difference between regulations and ordinances. It's crystal clear to me, if you take the time to read all those state statutes, there is a difference between regulations and ordinance by state statute. Once the police jury veil themselves to the statute that creates a planning commission, and once we, now, like anything with law, you can dicker about any little fine-tuned thing. Once this parish and this jury adopted a master plan, that kicks in all authority transfer to them. Now, y'all gotta dig deep to convince yourself. You can listen to Sam DeQuilla all you want, or Richard Howell, or Jeff Luby all you want, but each one of y'all need to get a grip on this all yourself so you can know where you stand on that. I've read the ordinance. I've called the Attorney General's office. I've read their opinions with other parishes on this very question about regulation. Where does the line of separation of the authority of a planning commission, which is appointed in most cases, or all cases, and an elected body? To me, it's clear. There are regulations, and like Skip said, we've been saying for quite some time, we try to point y'all to those statutes for y'all to read. We've sent y'all volumes of paperwork in the statute and asked y'all to read that stuff. Come up with your own interpretation of reading it. So there is a difference, in my opinion, on the regulations and what we're trying to do here. It's not confusing at all on me, but what we're trying to do is separate out the regulation and ordinance. Again, Sam ain't here, so I hate talking when he ain't here. On the front end of this thing, the first thing out of my mouth was to him, Sam, the only reason I'm even going to serve on this thing, if we understand we need to separate these regulations and the ordinance that goes over here to the jury. It's crystal clear on that stuff. And even the appeal process, and we talked about that till we're blue in the face. Now, what you're talking about, I do understand what you're saying. If they say, okay, we got that authority, we're gonna start operating under that, and things start occurring, and then this lags on the ordinance, and now that stuff don't jive, I totally understand what you're saying on that. All I can say on that is tell them people to pump the brakes on not even saying we're gonna move forward with that till you get an answer on your ordinance, if that's gonna change. I do understand what you're saying, that you can move forward and there'll be a conflict there, because you're dealing with old ordinance over here, they're saying we're operating under this. So I get where you're coming from that, Chris. But the regulations being separate over here, them having sole final say on that, which nobody seems to want. Look, here's the deal. Y'all are elected officials. Mr. Howell's right. Y'all are the ones going to get sued. But guess what? They can be brought in lawsuits too. These people don't get paid a buck for it. They spend all their time up there. They're not going to put their neck out on the thing and say, hey, tell y'all, we got the authority. They're going to say, hey, whatever y'all tell us, that's charges. Doing everything above board on the thing. We'll put his neck on the line because he's appointed on the thing and volunteering his time. So,
But Jeff, there's one thing that could have helped this situation a whole lot, and that is that how many police jurors and how many people in the public have had an opportunity to even see the final draft, to be able to read the strikeouts and whatever, so they could understand what we as a committee did. I'll answer that for you. No one. They could have also been given that illustrious list that JR has up there of the major changes, to be able to read through and appreciate and be ready for this meeting. This secret all the time, oh, well, is not going to work. It needs to be above board. It needs to go out to the public. It needs to be given to the police jurors so they can actually have the opportunity, if they choose to read and be prepared. This was cockamamie because it had 24 hours notice?
Was a
That's
lot
not
of people
fair.
here, Johnny, there's a lot of people
Well,
here.
yeah, you know why?
Enough. Chrissy, you have the floor. You have something to say?
I was the juror that brought this up to have this committee. Under no circumstance did I think we were going to get a committee that was going to increase what could happen, like 20 houses on a servitude. And then when I hear that it really wasn't a vote, it makes me suspicious of the whole process.
well, I can answer that question real simple. Real simple. Lewis, what's the first thing I told you when you called me to ask me on this committee?
You told me to say it.
Yeah, but I told you under a couple of situations. I'm not going to tell you one of the situations, but the other was we had a document sitting there for 5 years that this man tried to get passed. And when I told you, I'm not planting that flag on that document and said this is the best thing mankind ever come up with. I said, but that's our starting point. We're not going to throw that in the damn trash can and start from scratch when I know this man here, all kind of people have served on this committee over 4 or 5 years. So, Jody, there ain't nothing been in secret. Everything's been. That document that they're looking at right now is a culmination of about 5 or 6 years of a lot of input and stuff. And it ain't perfect. And it ain't just been 24 hours to look at. It's been 5 years that she's new. We got 3 new people on there. There's been a lot of people to look at it. And as we're saying too, though, Ms. Jody, there's no blue ink on that agenda tonight. There was no action item on that. It was just for these folks, and it's the public here can always be at the end of these meetings for them to discuss this stuff. So I don't see what the big deal is. This is supposed to be at a roundtable discussion with them, and the public can always voice their stuff on it.
Go ahead, Ms. Sam.
As a constituent of the parish, and I was part of the Dudley thing, so we're a little bit cautious, but even this last map, he brought it to the planning and zoning, apparently the month prior, the meeting prior, and said, do you have any problems with this? Then it went to the planning and zoning meeting, and then it was pushed to the police jury pending approval from legal counsel. But then my attorney pulled up Mill Creek ordinances that say you can't change the dimension of a lot. And so it's a little concerning, like in this situation, that map would have been considered a minor subdivision of property. So it would have had to go to the police jury under these new regulations. And that's a little bit concerning for someone who, like, it would have been an illegal map. And
There's
so,
always
what do
an
you
appeal
do?
process, you can appeal to them. If you looked at that.
Well, I realize that, but it's almost like I have to do the planning and zoning's job in that situation because they should have caught that.
Do you think they're perfect? These
No,
people-
but why should a person, a constituent of the parish, have to go behind the planning and zoning to do their job?
Because you should be concerned about your parish. It's apparently
The
Johnny's
planning and
concerned
zoning,
that
if they can
everyone here
approve
hadn't read this whole
things, should
thing.
do their job.
Man, let me just tell you this, all these other jurisdictions we deal with, the elected officials, the buck stops with, I mean, I can go down the list, central, all this stuff doesn't go to the central council and the mayor, it stops with that planning commission. East Baton Rouge Parish, a lot of their stuff stops with the planning
I don't feel
commission.
like you can compare us to East Baton Rouge Parish because they have a paid planning commission. We are a rural parish. Where
My
are
point
other
is,
parishes?
my point is, everybody's got an appeal process up the ladder to the officials and always to the civil courts. The courts are always there regardless of what your elected officials do. And God bless these elected officials, but, I mean, are these elected officials any more smarter than the normal person sitting there? They were normal persons before they got elected. I mean, I get a little bit upset when people keep poo-pooing on the daggum appointed people like these are morons sitting up here that can't read and write and interpret stuff themselves. And when they make a mistake, oh Lord, see there? You can't trust them. Elected officials? Are you kidding me? You want to put your trust 100% in elected officials?
And these people are volunteering their time and just spend a lot of time on it. You expect them to be perfect?
All right, everybody's voiced their opinion pretty much on this. We've got planning and zoning consensus is 20 lots to move it up. We're gonna hold it 5 lots of the minor subdivision, with the exceptions to change. We'll make that shift around.
JR, can I make a recommendation?
Hang on just a minute. We'll get now let's go over major subdivisions. I know what your recommendation. We'll hold 4 lots. That's the
That's
only.
what my recommendation is gonna be.
That's the only change that's.
I'm gonna take a quote straight from Mr. Jeff. Why don't you pump your brakes a little bit on that and send the ordinances up and see if they even got a chance?
Well, that's what we're gonna try and get through here. The rest of this ordinance thing, because we want it to go to you. That's why we're doing this discussion, so we can talk about it next week. And if everybody's good with the ordinance recommendation, we'll recommend it to the jury, then y'all can put it out in public hearing, and we'll know by the first meeting in June whether or not you're even gonna put it to public hearing. So by our meeting in the end of June, y'all have 2 chances to get it to public hearing. We can always stop it,
Mr.
put it on
Gustavo,
hold.
when I appoint this committee to review the ordinance, once we get on reviewing and make the changes, we bring it back to planning and zoning, bring it to the jury, we call for a public hearing, and then we'll go on. It's a process to go through.
But you know, that's
But
right.
that was
You're
the
exactly
process
right
that
about
we
that
were supposed to
process.
go through
But
last
like
time.
Joni's so concerned about everybody reading things, this doesn't have to be, you don't have to vote and make a final decision right there in public hearing. Y'all can discuss it.
We
and
can
say, "Look,
advise
we want
them,
some
wait
more
on it."
input. We want to approve this. It doesn't have to go right then and
No,
there.
we
It's
can
not the end of the line.
And advise them not to
That's
do
what I don't
anything.
understand. Why
Change,
you so
you can make
concerned?
any number of changes after the public hearing, depending on public input.
You have another time
To
here, you have
have
to make a
public
change.
input, you have to know what what's being done.
He's trying to get to that point. That's why the planning
And you got
commission's
to,
here
yeah.
looking at this,
Steph,
getting some
yeah,
public
comment.
input so they can discuss it and come up with a document.
You got a comment?
Yeah, it seems like the broad picture here is part of this revision that we're working on is actually to help protect some of these potential property buyers inside of this by giving them some road infrastructure to work with as a mandated process. And I would think that's a good thing, because if you leave it up to anybody, perhaps somebody without experience who wants to try to do a development, even if it's a small 4 or 5 lot development, then you're given a would-be unknowing purchaser some level of protection within that ordinance by requiring that road space to be done. So I think that's a good proposition to get in place. I think in addition to that, having some consideration for the utilities and how they're going to be fed into that property may also be part of that consideration. And the biggest hang-up with Mr. Hall is the 4 and 5 lot, which we're having this conflict with. Leave it at 4 and at least get the road properties segment of this stuff. So you get some level of protection with utilities and all, so that those property owners have a chance of purchasing. And it's something that's reliable.
One of the things that's not in this ordinance or in the regulations is the construction options, because they're just too difficult and they're subject to change. The engineer's gonna provide that back for the parish. In other words, if it's gonna be a 30-foot servitude, it's gonna have, you're gonna put a gravel road on it, because it's gonna be 5 lots, then you're gonna have a cross-section and what you have to do to build that road. And that road has to be built. Now, it's not gonna be 2 lines down the thing, and it's gonna be a grass track road. You don't even have to follow those 2 lines. It's gonna be a road built in town. The other thing is, the same way with the longer road subdivision streets and roads, they're gonna have to either have a cul-de-sac or T, or, what do you call it, offset T, L, there's 2 or 3 different terms, but he's gonna have engineered drawings that whoever the developer is can pick, and depending on which way they turn and everything, they can either look like a P, or a backwards P, or a cul-de-sac circle, or a T, or an L.
Well, and to be honest,
all that. But those are gonna be drawings and options that they're gonna get in a packet, and that's gonna be in the ordinance, because it's subject to best practices of the engineer, and the engineers have to do it.
Okay, let me say something. At one of our meetings, planning and zoning, a young man came in and he wanted some things done. And we gave him a little list of everything he had to do. And he went to the police jury and they gave him a little list. And he came back to us and we said he had needed to do something else. And at that meeting, I said that if we give people a list of things to do, if we give them direction and they follow direction, the end result should be approval. It shouldn't keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If we are going to design the rule and we give out the rule, then we need to abide by the rule we make. It doesn't need to keep going back to the police jury and coming back to us, going back to them and coming back to us. And I honestly believe that dividing this is going to stop a lot of that. It's going to stop a lot of this overflow of you go fight here, you go fight there. I've lived in this parish 30 years, okay? I'm from Baton Rouge. I can tell you everything about it. Mr. Meady and them really know Baton Rouge. But we seem to fight more than do anything. We seem to fight more than govern, and I don't understand that. I agree with what they said. I don't like someone thinking I'm stupid just because I got appointed. And that seems to be a consensus, is that, well, we can look at it, but we need to send it to the adults to approve. I think this right here is going to stop a lot of that.
I don't think that anybody thinks anybody that serves on any planning commission lacks intelligence or integrity. What I'm finding, the confusion I'm having in this whole discussion is, the planning commission has a very important role, but they only are advisory. That's the point, the difference I see. Y'all, you look at the ordinance, that you're right, there should be just one ordinance that you look at and that police do. And I respect the staff. And I think everybody's working, it tries to work together. Now, maybe sometimes somebody kind of jumps a little bit outside that parameter. I don't know. But my point is this, every planning commission I've ever had to work with, they make a recommendation to the police jury. Police jury then has, they can't, if they don't like it, they send it back to y'all. It skips right. Y'all have the final say. It's kind of a two-party thing. Y'all make a recommendation. Y'all work it out with the developer. And it goes to the police jury and there's a public hearing and the police jury doesn't like it. They can't deny it. He's right about it. But they can send it back to you, which keeps y'all, and it's kind of like government. You got executive and representative. And y'all have a very important role of looking at the ordinances and creating what you're doing tonight. It's very productive. Y'all might disagree, but it's productive. But at the end, y'all are going to make a recommendation to the police chief. Because one thing talking about Central and even West Feliciana, we have a different government. We have a whole new charter. You're under the police chief. And the only recommendation I'm going to give, and you did this at the last meeting, I have a hard time seeing how y'all can work through all of this, because it's got to be different. It's all legal. I mean, it's all involved law. How nobody had, how the committee worked on it without having some attorney there to guide them and tell them, okay, this is why you have a major subdivision and a minor subdivision. This is
Tommy was
what
on
the
the
law says.
committee.
Sir?
Tommy was on the committee.
Who was that?
Sam, who's on the committee?
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't, but I'm just saying, one thing that we had problems in West Feliciana, and they appointed, Sam appointed attorney Mike Hughes, who's gone now. He sat in at every planning and zoning commission meeting, not to tell y'all what to do, but just if y'all had a question dealing with the law, to give you advice on it, that's all. And so I kind of feel like, well, she corrected me, you said Sam was there, and I didn't, and I'm glad I brought that up.
Well, he is, and he's the legal advisor for planning and zoning, and is supposed to be at every meeting.
Yes, and he has.
Schedules being what they are, he doesn't, but
Mr.
anyway.
Chairman, can I go back to the point made earlier too, that in a few weeks, we're gonna actually have, for the first time that I know of, a subject matter expert to act on behalf of the parish, and it's gonna be an engineer. So, I think that this could solve a lot of this. That individual is gonna be working for the police jury in the best interest of the parish, in infrastructure and in all these projects. And if we can slow down on it some, I believe there is gonna need to be some ordinance changes to include this parish engineer's input in everything else we're talking about. Because that is gonna be a subject matter expert, and it is gonna be an individual that's working on the best interest of the parish.
And that would not be anything new, and that's what they used to do in the past, and I think Skip they had Bill Munro, who was the parish engineer, and it used to be that the surveyor took it to the police jury office, and you would have two commissioners that would review the map, and then Bill Munro would sign off as the engineer. So I welcome what you're saying, and it's something that the parish used to do 15 years ago or so and got away from it.
Way before my.
You had a very experienced engineer on this committee.
We did.
And I don't know who you're talking about hiring, but if it's an entry-level engineer, I don't think I'd place
We
a
have
whole lot of.
36, right now we have 36 individuals and firms that have picked up packages.
So what can you afford? I mean, are you looking at someone with how much experience?
That's gonna
Do
be
y'all have
discussed Monday
something?
night at the finance meeting.
So you don't know yet?
No.
So it could be someone entry level?
No, it's not
No,
what we're
we're
looking at.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
There's a scoring criteria that's gonna be.
What is your criteria?
I can get you a copy of it.
What I'm saying is, that could be a real valuable thing, or maybe not so much.
Okay.
Mr. Moody.
Different, wait a minute, different subjects. Forget the engineer, let's get back to the ordinance. The woman came here at Roundtable. We can fight about the engineer for months, but
That's what I want to say.
that's 36 people.
We have an engineer on this committee that worked with us.
Exactly, and he provided a lot of
A lot of
input,
information.
and he's gonna give us the drawings and the check sheets for the major stuff. The minor subdivision, there was maybe a couple commas changed on the checklist, not a whole lot. There's gonna be a change on the sanitarian statement, time of development, that's when you're gonna go see the sanitarian. He's not gonna be involved with the maps per se, because maps aren't for development, maps are strictly dimensional. Okay, now, to get down to the major subdivision, development ordinance, the part of the ordinance, the one that the police here are gonna get hit with. Taking everything that the capital area sent in, a whole bunch of definitions, some work from the last committee, the work from this committee. The street dimensions and standards were revised by the engineer. He gave us up-to-date stuff, more DOTD changes, more state changes than anything else. The state changes was about every year, at least some sort. Added a sewer requirement for anything under 3 acres. If you have a development under 3 acres, you're going to develop a way to manage the sewer, because there's not enough room on the lot to keep it there. Public ditches are not the place to go with your tail line. I don't care if that's gray water coming there or not. It creates a mess. We have them all over the parish now. They need any more situations. And the other thing was revise the requirements for the different stages. So there's going to be a checklist for preliminary plat, construction plans, and final plat. So the people that are doing these things, they're going to have a new guide to go by. even if they don't pass some of the things, they need to do the checklist, because it's gonna tell when you need to do an impact study for water, drainage, utilities. And that's not in a preliminary anyway, because a preliminary is conceptual. What size, how many lots and what size?
Yeah, even schools got it came into play. We can't regulate school. It came into play.
Yeah, we don't, because, and I've talked to some of these developers, what they're talking about is bringing in teachers from East Baton Rouge, come up here to buy a house because it's lower taxes, and they're gonna take their kids with them to East Baton Rouge, because they're gonna take them to their school. Or they're gonna homeschool, is a new up and coming trend, not anything new, it's been going for 20 years. But a lot of people homeschool. So although the schools are concerns for everybody, and that's how we are, I don't care where you go in this country, schools always play catch up. We'll build a house and a bunch of kids come in, we want to build more schools. But that's the three major changes to major development. The other thing is we just moved 6 lots and above up to major development, so that's gonna fall into that now.
Now, won't that go in the newspaper for everyone to see? Don't we have to publish that?
They have to publish.
It's gonna, no, when they propose an
On the
ordinance,
website.
because it's 55 pages long, it'll be copies available up here. Anybody wants to pick one
So
up.
anybody
Once
can-
they put it to public hearing, they go on the counter and pick up.
Can it be put on the website?
Yeah, they put it there.
And you can load anything.
Yeah, they're on the website, really.
And it's, the ordinance, I say 55, but it's
It's what-
46 pages, 47 pages right now. That'll be loaded on the website. I made copies for people to pick up before it goes to public hearing. They're gonna like some, they're gonna not like pieces, but they can come up here with their input on the pieces. Then once the 9 jurors put it in or out, then it gets cut down to all the old stuff gets chopped out of it. The stuff that don't apply anymore gets chopped out of it, and it goes to the ordinance for adoption. In other words, once they adopt it, after they make their pen and ink changes after public hearing, then it gets cut down to the factual ordinance, and those copies are gonna be on the website. You'll be able to pick them up.
Put a checklist in there for, when they go back.
The checklist is gonna be a handout, though, it's not gonna be per se in the ordinance, because the checklist and individual schematics for cuts on the roads, cul-de-sacs, and T turnarounds, and L turnarounds, and T turnarounds, that's all gonna be in schematics where they can be changed by an engineer if he notices something different. You know, they change the length of the school bus. If it gets to be any longer, you gotta have more room to turn it around. Fire trucks too. Fire trucks, especially if you get a big truck.
Just to be clear, if after a public hearing, whether it's the planning commission or police jury, changes are made, you have to have another public hearing, don't you?
The recommendations.
You should, because now you got something else you're dealing with.
The recommendations from planning and zoning will go to the police jury. They're gonna set a public hearing.
But what I'm saying is, whether it's your public hearing or theirs, if they say, well, look, we got some problems here, we wanna change some things, if they change it, they're not gonna just change and vote on it, they're gonna change it, have another public hearing so everyone can see what the changes were, right? Isn't that right, Lou?
Well, no, there's no requirement to have a post adoption. There's no requirement to have a post adoption, but there certainly can be put on the website for everybody to read. And then you'll see what the changes are, that the new ordinance is. I know what you're talking about, Skip, after they make the changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go out, they adopt it, they made the changes, they adopt the ordinance. Then it gets loaded to the website, or you can pick up a hard copy, or it can be emailed to you, because they're gonna have it solved.
Well, I thought if they're gonna make changes, I mean, the public's had input on a certain document, like Joni said.
Right.
And then you go make changes, shouldn't they
Police
have?
jury's the one making the changes, though,
But I mean,
after
they
public
make
input.
Tell me about a public hearing just to vet that addition of the
The
document,
changes
and
in the
then they
police
can
jury.
vote on it too.
Isn't that right? I mean, that's what I thought.
That would be very easy.
Yeah.
Just to be
It's
transparent.
still,
that's what I'm saying.
it's still, even after we come, we don't have to vote on, we don't have to vote after for a period, we go within a while when it comes back.
Right.
We don't have to vote on the same now.
But that's a police jury issue there, public hearing. Does anybody else have anything to offer?
I had one question, and this goes back to the first thing you brought up about minor subdivisions being approved by the planning commission. Now, did I hear you correctly that you said that you would not need the parish sanitarian signature on it?
Parish sanitarian has nothing on the map. The only thing that's gonna be on there is a sanitation note that says permits must be obtained at time of development. In other words, when you start building a house, just put a trailer on or move home, whatever you're gonna do, you gotta go pull a permit then. That map he has no bearing on that map.
I'm
And it's
just
gonna be,
asking.
really, it's
I just
gonna
wanna
cut
make sure.
down to 3 signatures. 2 planning and zoning people besides the host of the land surveyor and any dependents or any
Right, yeah.
servitudes, that kind of
Approval
stuff.
process would be-
Approval process will be 3. 2, and then whoever's gonna do it in the police jury office, because if it's administrative, they have to go file it and then bring it back. So he'll sign them, give them a copy, let them go to the clerk of court, and they don't get the rest of their copies until they come back with a,
Okay.
It's been filed.
And I think that might have been a little misinterpretation earlier. So it does go to the police jury in some form for somebody there.
be it somebody in the office that's gonna sign it, or if it's a major subdivision, it's gonna go to them for approval anyway. Preliminary plat's still gonna go to them.
Okay.
And then the old thing had everybody coming back, kept rolling back in the plan. Once the police jury approves the preliminary plat, planning and zoning's out of it.
So basically what you're saying is that going back to the way they did it about 6 or 7, from 86 to about 5 or 6 years ago, because there were 3 signatures. 2 planning and zoning, and 1 was usually Judith Kelly, somebody with the police jury that just acknowledged that the police jury.
It had been
got-
filed, that they had their copies, and everybody.
Well, this was before they even filed. It used to be you didn't have to file that, and then they.
Yeah, they filed, it was just back here in cabinet.
But anyway, I'm just saying, you kind of were going back to the way it was in the past. 3 signatures.
Okay. Yes.
Am I wrong? I mean, y'all know that, just Judith Kelly, 2.
I just remember 2, actually, 2 commissioners.
2 commissioners, but
I
the police
just-
jury did sign it.
Yeah.
Usually it was Judith.
Yeah, but Judith was always on the commission when most of them
Well, you got a good point there too, man. That's a good point.
That's a true
You was
statement.
on the commission too.
For a long time, yeah. Anybody else have any other input? You got it back, Mr. Chairman. Finish. Public comment?
I thought that's what we've been doing.
Public comment.
Lots of them.
All right, that brings us to adjournment.
I make a
My
motion.
favorite subject.
I make a motion.
Got a motion to adjourn, got a second? Got a second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Did everybody sign in on that sign-in sheet that went around? If you didn't, please do it before you leave. It's a little 5x7 pad floating around there somewhere. I won't say it's on, that's it. Those guys.
You got to
Nothing's gonna change. It's gonna be just I didn't know I had.
What you doing?
Yeah.